It is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano joined by Andy Kostka and Kyle Goon. We are going to break down the breaking news that we just got. If you are joining us here live on Facebook, YouTube, or X, you just saw it come across your screen. Gregory Soto, left-handed reliever for the Baltimore Orioles, has been traded to the New York Mets for a pair of minor league right-handed pitchers. We're going to break down this move from every angle, whether the Orioles got good value, what they're getting in these two pitchers, and why they made the move now. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, we are live here on your social feeds, or you could be listening to us after the fact on any of your favorite podcast platforms. At any rate, give us a like, give us a 5-star review, share this podcast with your friends. We're going to break down the Gregory Soto deal. We are 6 days away from the trade deadline. We've already seen a trade earlier this July. We saw Brian Baker traded to the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for the 37th overall pick in the draft. Orioles used that on Slater DeBrun. And now they trade Gregory Soto to the Mets for a pair of right-handed pitching prospects. Andy, what was your initial reaction when you saw the Orioles made this move here on July 25th?
Initially, I wasn't shocked that it's Gregory Soto because he is going to have value to basically any team that is a contender. I know the walks are somewhat of an issue, but he is a left-hander out of the pen who can throw upper 90s to 100. So he will have a market for a long time if he continues that. So with that said, I think the return was great. It deepens Baltimore's farm system of pitching, which they desperately need. And the crown jewel of the acquisition would be Wellington Aracena. He is a 20-year-old, plays for the St. Louis Mets down in Single A, Florida State League. Prospect Live is a Prospect Savant rather is a Statcast-based website for minor league pitchers. You look at his page, you see a lot you like at the Single A level. A lot of the chase rate, the whiff rate, everything like that is good, as is usual for a lot of stuff-oriented pitchers. A little bit, 13.5% walk rate, which isn't great, but that's not super unusual for a guy at that age, at that level. But he has a live arm, averages 97 on the four-seam fastball. He has a cutter and a slider that are predominant pitches in his arsenal as well, and a changeup as well that is a little less noteworthy. But he's seems to be an impressive return. Cameron Foster increases depth, 26 years old, in Double A right now. Spent a little bit of time this year in Triple A. Has a good strikeout to walk ratio. Heck, you could see that guy pitching in the majors for the Orioles this year, just because you need somebody to, and he increases the depth of the farm system a little bit.
Yeah, and this is exactly what the Orioles were kind of hoping to get back at the trade deadline, is arms, and they do so by getting somebody who's close to the big leagues in Cameron Foster, and somebody who's probably going to take a while to reach the big leagues in Wellington Aracena, who's just 20 years old and pitching an A-ball. Kyle, I want to get your thoughts, because you've written on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months, about how, I think it was 3 weeks ago, you said it's time to pack it in. It's time for Mike Elias to start to accept the consequences of this failed season. It's unfortunately time for fans to give up hope on a potential second half run. And in the 2-3 weeks since you released that article, the Orioles have done nothing but back up your claim that this season is lost. How do you feel about them making this move with several days to go before the deadline?
I mean, I like it. I mean, as we all know, the Orioles are probably going to move at least a few guys. I know there's sort of mixed thought on, okay, well, if somebody can help you in 2026 and you have a chance at re-signing them, should you trade them? But, Soto, kind of a clear cut, does he really help you next year? Is his value more to another team, I think his value always was more to another team. I know a couple Orioles fans who had anxiety every time he came up in relief because of that walk rate that we talked about. But his stuff has always been good, and he's marketable for the same reason that the Orioles wanted him last year. He has great stuff. Obviously, left-handed side. Down the stretch. I know initially after the trade he was not good. Down the stretch last year he was pretty good, and he's just going to be that for another team. So I'm not surprised. I appreciate that the Orioles are proactive on what should be a pretty busy trade deadline for them. And then you kind of see, as we talked about with the prospects, there's two timelines. And Foster, it's a guy who can help you this year to early next year. And Wellington, it's a guy who, we're probably talking about 2-3 years from now, but he does have a lot of talent.
Yeah, and in terms of the trade that the Orioles made a year ago for Gregory Soto, remember they acquired those two relievers from the Phillies in two separate deals. Left-hander Gregory Soto, right-hander Seranthony Dominguez. Both of those guys, as you said, Kyle, had some bumps in the road in their Orioles journey, but both of those guys now have recouped their value to the point where Gregory Soto has been traded, and I expect Seranthony Dominguez to probably go at some point this week as well. Ironically, the Orioles gave up two minor league right-handed pitchers last year for Gregory Soto when they got him from an NL East team. And then they get back two right-handed minor league pitchers from another NL East team in order to send Gregory Soto out. The two guys that they sent out a year ago to get Soto from the Phillies were Moises Chaussee and Seth Johnson. In the 12 months since then, Seth Johnson has bounced back and forth between the big leagues and the minor leagues in Philadelphia, and Moises Chaussee, unfortunately, has required Tommy John surgery. So the book is still out on that trade. I think the Orioles are still happy with the return that they got for Gregory Soto. After he fixed his issue for the first month after the Orioles got him last year, he was a steady bullpen piece down the stretch and pitched in a playoff game. And it was certainly not his fault that the Orioles got swept out of the playoffs. And so far this year, he was pitching with 3.96 ERA and 36 1/3 innings. As you said, Kyle, there's always some agita every time he comes in the game. He's not perfect. At this point, he's no longer the closer that he was for the Detroit Tigers years ago, but he still has electric stuff. We know lefties are valued around the league. We know that playoff teams like the New York Mets are going to be in need of this kind of player. And to send out a guy who's making pretty cheap amount of money, $5.3 million for the entire season. So prorate that, only 2 months and a playoff run for the rest of the deal. The Orioles had to cash in on an asset that they had here. Andy, let's go back to the two guys that they got here, because that's going to be what Orioles fans are going to focus on. Wellington in particular, as you said, he is the gem of this trade. Baseball America had him as the 28th prospect in the Met system. MLB Pipeline had him even higher than that, had him in the top 20. Good size, 6'3", 180 pounds, I should say, 2.38 ERA, almost 12 Ks per nine. I'm curious to see, and it's a ways away for this guy. He's only 20 years old. He's pitching an A-ball. But I am curious to see if the Orioles stick with him, and if so, how long they stick with him as a starting pitching prospect. But regardless, you got to like his strikeout numbers. You got to like his future value, because 82nd percentile in K percentage, 100th percentile in PS score, which is an interesting stat from Prospect Savant, which is a percentile to evaluate a prospect's value. I mean, that is essentially taking everything into account. That is all you can hope for when you get a guy back from another team's farm system.
Yeah, this is a great pickup for Baltimore. If you ask about if he's going to stay as a starter, I don't technically know. I heard of this guy all of 2 hours ago. So I'm telling you stuff that I learned about an hour ago. But from what I've gathered, and I trust Baseball America does phenomenal scouting, and luckily we have an account with them, so I will credit Baseball America with some of the scouting report here. They see him long term as a relief pitcher, and just looking at his arsenal, I would tend to agree with that. He is a guy that throws super high velocity, fastball, cutter, slider. You love that out of the pen, especially if you can have a swing roll kind of guy. We're talking years down the road here, but Baltimore really does not have and this can change. Obviously, we're talking years down the road. But Baltimore right now, and conceivably in the future, doesn't really have a swing man, which is such a popular thing for other teams around the league. And what I mean by swing man, it's a guy that can come out of the pen, throw 2-3 innings, and bridge the gap between, if it's a shorter start from a starting pitcher, kind of bridge the gap between a starter and the back end relievers. So I really like what this, Aracena brings to the farm system. We'll see how he develops. I imagine Baltimore will kind of give him those opportunities of being a starter and stretching him out in that manner. But I wouldn't be shocked, as Baseball America projects, that he will be a reliever later in his time, especially when he reaches the big leagues.
Yeah, in terms of bullpen help for the rest of this season and next season, Andy, you mentioned the fact that the Orioles are going to need some arms. They dealt Gregory Soto today. They could be dealing Anthony Dominguez tomorrow or sometime in the next week. There are other bullpen pieces that might be on the move. There are starters that are going to be shipped out of here at some point, potentially. The Orioles are going to need some help. They're going to need a lot of arms for the final 2 months of the season just to get the season over with. And then they're going to need a lot of bullpen pieces next year. But that was going to be the case regardless, because they had all these guys on expiring deals. They have Andrew Kittredge, who is a potential trade piece, who's got a team option for next year. Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, both those guys were going to be unrestricted free agents after this season. They're going to remake this bullpen almost entirely. And in terms of Foster, Cameron Foster, the 26-year-old that they got in this deal as well, this is a guy who is very close to the big leagues. Dominated the AA level so far this season after he was really moved from a starting spot to the bullpen in 2024 in AA. 1.01 ERA in 26 2/3 innings in AA coming out of the bullpen. Found a home there and just got promoted to AAA and has not gone so great so far, but tiny sample size, just 3 2/3 innings, given up 7 earned runs. He's got a four-seamer, a cutter, a curveball, a slider. PS score on him, so evaluating his value as a prospect, according to the website, is 73rd percentile. Got a good K rate, got a not so great walk rate, 15%. But as a 26-year-old who's already in AAA, you could potentially look at Cameron Foster as a bullpen piece for next year. And Kyle, we knew that this team was going to need to remake their bullpen in 2026, and perhaps they got a future reliever that can help them out in the near term in Cameron Foster.
Yeah, and obviously, who among us has not gone to AAA and immediately got blown up right after our promotion? You know what I mean? Let's not throw stones in the glass house. I mean, but yeah, it's just 26, a bit more of a known quantity. Hard to imagine him rocketing up in stature past what his evaluation has been so far. But I mean, just sometimes you need guys who can take innings, and there's still a lot of season left in terms of the Orioles just got to play this out. So this is going to be a end game of more experimentation, of more seeing what the Orioles have down in the system, and I think Cameron Foster is a decent bet in that front. I mean, the Orioles have really specialized, especially in their bullpen, of kind of picking guys off the pile. I mean, Brian Baker was kind of like that, right? Yanier Cano was not highly thought of when he got to the Orioles on a trade. They're really good at reclaiming these guys who don't feel like they're anything necessarily, and then do become something. So I think he's going to be one of those guys probably in that mix down the stretch, because there's not really a lot to play for. So you might as well see, can Cameron and Foster help them in 2026?
Yeah, and I also, Andy, you're right to correct me. Cameron Foster has made 2 appearances in AAA for the Syracuse Mets, but has been demoted back down to AA. So he has bounced back and forth. He's just been promoted a couple times to AAA. The Mets are kind of bouncing him back and forth between AA and AAA. But Andy, you had another thought as well on Cameron Foster.
Yeah, actually, it's more of a thought just about the bullpen construction as a whole. I know there's, there may be some frustration when fans see, Colin Selby in a big role on Wednesday, I believe it was, pitching in the 8th inning. We obviously learned that's because Felix Bautista was injured, so it elevates a guy. But Baltimore had a real issue with their bullpen construction, and it was that they didn't have many pieces who could be optioned. We saw Yennier Cano optioned earlier this year. That's because really the guys that can be optioned, if it's a fully healthy bullpen, are Yennier Cano, Felix Bautista, and Keegan Aiken. And all three of those guys you don't really want to option. I will, continue to, tout that. I know, Keegan Aiken sometimes has some difficulties, but again, lefty who can cover multiple innings out of the pen, pretty valuable piece there. So you don't necessarily want to option a guy like that. When you add somebody like Cameron Foster, who has options available for multiple seasons, that is just another depth piece that you don't have to DFA a guy every time. You can kind of have that Norfolk shuttle going a little bit more frequently. You can get a fresh arm into the bullpen after a big game. That's valuable. Baltimore needs to, when they reconstruct this bullpen, they need to go sign some guys that can be late inning pieces like Andrew Kittredge, like Sir Anthony Dominguez, like Gregory Soto. But they also need to make sure that their middle relief guys have options, they have flexibility, so that they can have more of a shuttle and get fresh arms in, because that's been a major issue all season.
Yeah, and we saw this coming. I mean, we were saying that back in February that Mike Elias loves optionable pieces, especially in the bullpen, and he just didn't have that this year. That's why this bullpen was different, but he was opting for experience over optionality. The experience was certainly there. Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto and Andrew Kittredge, but he just didn't have too many pieces to play with. And we said before the season, Felix Bautista, Yennier Cano, those are guys that if in a perfect world, they're pitching so well that you don't have to option those guys. Well, we saw Yennier Cano struggle so much in the first half of the season that at one point he was demoted down to AAA Norfolk. But for the most part, the bullpen has not been elite. The bullpen has not been a top 5 unit in baseball, but of all 3 units between the bullpen, the rotation, and the lineup, I think you could say the bullpen has held up its side of the bargain the best out of all 3 of those. And that's why I think you still have guys like Dominguez and Kittredge and now Soto who could be traded here. The rotation has obviously had its struggles since the get-go. The lineup has not performed the way that it should. But next year, this bullpen, which has been pretty solid for the first half of the season, is just going to look completely different. And I think the way that they could get optionable pieces for next year is by moving some of those pitching prospects that we've seen the Orioles use as starting pitchers into the bullpen. I think of guys like potentially Cade Povich, although I think the Orioles would still like to keep him as a starter. And I think of, in particular, guys like Chase McDermott, guys like Brandon Young. Those kind of guys, when they eventually are used as big leaguers routinely, I think that we could see them as valuable pieces coming out of the bullpen. The biggest thing is it would require that rotation to be much more stable than it has been this season. And that involves adding guys like Kyle Bradish and maybe Tyler Wells back into the fold. But it also involves this winter going out and getting stable pieces for this rotation, whether you sign them, whether you trade for them. That kind of getting those top end pitchers in your rotation can allow the more talented prospects that you have to be filtered into the bullpen. And those guys are young. Those guys are optionable. And I think that is something that could help this team going forward. But it requires Mike Elias to get top end starting pitchers from the get-go once they hit the offseason.
I completely agree. Brandon Young, just hopping on that. We've seen him, it's been an up and down first 7 starts of Brandon Young's career. But I think one of the bigger issues is as a young player, when you see a guy, second or third time through the order, it's going to be more difficult. So he has good stuff. I like what the splitter does against lefties for Brandon Young. Maybe if he's in, again, I love swing guys. If he is in one of, maybe a 2-3 inning roll out of the bullpen, short bursts when he's not seeing guys second and third times through, I really like what that looks like. Not to say that he's not going to develop into a great starting pitcher someday. Don't mean to put a cap on a guy, but I do think that could be short term, a better answer. But that a lot of it, as you say, is reliant on Kyle Bradish coming back, Tyler Wells coming back, Grayson Rodriguez coming back. We don't have an update on Grayson. He has been pulled back from his throwing program. He underwent an MRI in his elbow. We are awaiting more from Baltimore. Kyle Bradish just threw, I think, 2 innings it was. Our intern, Liana Handler, wrote about his first rehab outing. His first time off the mound in a competitive game in 13 months, I believe it was. So congratulations to Kyle Bradish. But go to the banner to read Liana's story on that.
Yeah. And I wanted to flip this forward, look ahead to what could be a week full of interesting deals that the Orioles make. They get things kicked off a few weeks ago with the Brian Baker trade. Obviously, the timing of that was because the Orioles wanted to get that draft pick before the MLB draft, right around the All-Star break. Now they deal Gregory Soto with 6 days to go before the deadline. The question is, what's next? Who is going to be the other guys that go? And this move didn't tell us a whole lot about whether Mike Elias truly intends to dip into his pool of guys who are under team control. Based on everything he said, and he did an interview with MLB Network Radio, he is intending to deal guys on expiring contracts first. But I think there is a possibility that if the offer is too good, he will start to deal guys that are under team control beyond the 2025 season. You think of guys like Felix Bautista, who just hit the injured list with shoulder soreness. I think he tends to be untouchable, and that injury certainly takes him out of the conversation. Ramon Laureano, who's got a $6.5 million team option for next year. Andrew Kittredge, who has a team option for next year. But Kyle, when you look ahead to what could be a busy week for Mike Elias in this front office, do you think that we start to see some guys come off the board between Ryan O'Hearn, Charlie Morton, maybe Cedric Mullins, Ramon Laureano? What do you think is the next domino to fall here?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be Morton. That would just be my guess. I mean, a guy who has a postseason track record, who's played in a bunch of clubhouses and is known to be a great guy and a great quote, as Andy lovingly knows. Andy, I've never heard Andy complain about typing out one of Charlie Morton's book-length quotes one time this season. I think he just loves it. But, he's just a guy who his stuff has been good. He's been improving in the last few months. It's sort of like the starting pitcher in your rotation is sometimes the hardest thing to trade for, I think. There's always some bats available. There's always some relief pitchers available. I just wouldn't be surprised if it was Charlie Morton next. I mean, and, but I do kind of wonder, to touch on your idea about guys under team control. And listen, the Orioles love team control. As we know, they are loath to trade away guys like team control. But I just keep thinking those are going to be the strongest offers. Those are guys who are going to get some of the strongest packages. And I kind of wonder if Ramon Laureano is on that list, even though you would love to have a guy like that for $6 million, especially with Tyler O'Neill still really scuffling. And you don't really know what he's going to be next year. You figure he has to be better than this, but you don't really know what's going to be next year. I mean, $6 million for Ramon Laureano, what he's been this season, would be a bargain. So I don't know, but I also think other teams want that too. They're going to make the strongest offers, and the fastest way for the Orioles to reload could possibly be trading a guy like Laureano, who would be under team control for another year.
Yeah, and Andy, you have some thoughts about Charlie Morton's trade value, somebody who 2 months ago, this would have been a laughable topic to talk about trading Charlie Morton. His value has changed a lot in the past month plus.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with Ramon Laureano. I just completely changed my idea, but I'll get back to Morton in a second. I promise you. Ramon Laureano, I had a story this week about best destinations for every player. I really see him as a fit for San Diego. San Diego, traditionally, AJ Preller, their GM, is very aggressive at the trade deadline. He is willing to move prospects. San Diego has a giant hole in their lineup in left field, and Ramon Laureano, you can just plug him in this year and next year, and you have what should be a tremendous piece for now in the playoffs. So I really see San Diego as a strong destination. And you can even package, a Ryan O'Hearn to make that deal even better. I mean, O'Hearn is a first baseman, DH, corner outfielder who adds a lot of power to. Well, he's not a power hitter, but he can add power to a lineup 830 some OPS this year. So I like San Diego as a destination for both of them. Jumping to Charlie Morton, and I promise I was getting back to this. He is a dude that teams super value because of what he brings to a clubhouse, and his experience in postseason baseball is invaluable. He's a guy that he can be a stable back end arm for the rest of the regular season, and then basically as soon as the postseason arrives, he has shown it in the past. His track record is amazing at it. He can be a 2-3 inning reliever in the bullpen during the postseason. He's done it before. I think he's going to do it again. So I really think Charlie Morton's value is high. It was super fascinating, and I typed out his book length quote yesterday. But I just side note, Charlie Morton's the most interesting man in baseball, and he has great music taste, which I appreciate. He was very frank yesterday, and he noted how part of the reason Baltimore is in this position is because he struggled to the extent he did for the first month and a half, 2 months of the season. He is a very honest, open man, and he recognizes that. I think that really hurts. That's something that weighs on him. That he did not help this team get to a level that he expected it to be before the season, that a lot of people in the organization expected before the season. So, it's a tough thing being traded, because he feels some ownership over what happened. But at the same time, he is going to be incredibly valuable for whichever team lands him.
Yeah, and this is a 2-time World Series winner. I mean, he has got a bevy of postseason experience, and he's been successful with just about every franchise that he's been a part of, between the Braves and the Astros and a brief stint in Philadelphia. He has had, bits of success in just about every city that he has pitched in. And I think teams will look at that and say, look, we may not ask Charlie Morton to start a playoff game. If we are in the NLCS or NLDS, we're not going to ask Charlie Morton to go out there and start game 2. But what we could use him for is pitching, eating a lot of innings in August and September, when we need to just get ourselves to the playoffs, get through all of this, and we'll figure out his role then. And maybe he comes out of the bullpen. He showed earlier this year that he can do that for the Orioles as well. That's really how he found his footing again in this Baltimore pitching staff, is coming out of the bullpen and figuring out what was going wrong and making it work. It is also not entirely his fault. The front office bears a lot of responsibility. The coaching staff bears responsibility for this mess of a season that the Orioles have had. And to bet on a 41-year-old pitcher in Charlie Morton is not always a bad bet when the talent is there. And certainly Morton has flashed it over the past couple months. But they bet on guys that were signing 1-year deals. Charlie Morton, Tomiyuki Sugano. They were betting on bounce backs from guys that perhaps they shouldn't have been. So the front office bears a lot of responsibility for that. And as they look to kind of flip the page towards next year, their focus is going to be on 2026, as you wrote about the other day, Andy. This is an opportunity where you should still be in the middle of a competitive window. You should still be going for it in 2026 and beyond. You still have some superstar players who are under team control. You have Jackson Holliday and Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westberg and Colton Cowser and all these guys. This is an opportunity for you to refresh your farm system, for you to refresh the talent around them. So to go out and make the trade like they did in Gregory Soto, to bring it full circle and get back Wellington Aracena, get back Cameron Foster, those are 2 guys that you hope you would be able to use next year, at least in 2026. And who knows, maybe somebody like Wellington Aracena, maybe he never reaches the Orioles because the Orioles flip him this offseason in order to get an ace starting pitcher. They just need to bring back more talent, use the expiring contracts that they have right now, whether it's Gregory Soto, whether it's, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and be able to get back, extract some value.
Yeah,
Go on,
sorry.
Tom.
I was going to just weigh in on that, because I know with Baker, it's a little bit troubling to some people that the timeline is, okay, here's our competitive balance pick. I don't know if Lil Slay is going to be up anytime soon, even though he signed for a lot of money. But I mean, I think the way that this trade works is a template for what you're talking about, Paul. That it's a chance to restock, and it's a little bit like, okay, here's some depth at the AAA level of which we need, and here's some depth at the single. Their arms in the single A and double A level are generally better than at the AAA level, but they're kind of serving a little bit of both masters, and I think that's valuable for the exact reason you mentioned, because you can still trade a guy like Wellington Arensena in a year or two if you need. I mean, we could be at next year's deadline kind of wondering, could somebody like that fetch a return for exactly what teams are trading for from the Orioles right now, a bat or an extra arm. So I think I know sometimes people get caught up in the level at which these prospects and these returns are going to contribute and how soon they're going to contribute. But at the end of the day, talent is an asset. Talent is always an asset. Talent can always help a baseball team that year, no matter how far away that talent is.
Andy?
I posted a thread of random thoughts the other day on
As you were wont
Twitter.
to do.
I tend to
Was this about baseball or was this about music?
It could be anything, but I tend to just spout the random thoughts, and sometimes they hit and sometimes they miss. But I think I might be onto something, and I don't have any inside information as to whether I am actually onto something, but the gut feels right. I would encourage the Orioles front office, and if Mike Elias is listening, which I hope he's not, because he should be talking to other people, I would still see this. This is a chance to buy and sell at the deadline, because you're advocating for, hey, we're going to be a good team in 2026. We're going to compete. Let's say you want Edward Cabrera from the Miami Marlins. You'd have to pay the deadline tax, but he's not a guy that some of the big contenders are considering right now as somebody they want for a playoff push. Go get a young starter like that. It would take a lot. I mean, we're talking. It might take a Dylan Beavers. It might take an Enrique Bradfield and a Kobe Mayo. It would be probably two of those names to get it done, plus a lower level minor leaguer, which is a big ask. But if you believe that, hey, this arm can help us, he has 3 years of team control after this. I mean, that's an incredible opportunity to buy if Miami wants to move him at the deadline. It would be kind of interesting to see Miami, have a starting lineup. This is just another random thought. A starting lineup with Kyle Stowers, Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, Dylan Beavers. That'd be hilarious. I would love every second of it. But
or it'd be nightmare fuel.
It would be nightmare, one of the two. But I do see that, hey, Baltimore's a seller, but there is an opportunity here if they are willing to go buy a guy too that is under extensive team control. Maybe even Sandy Alcantara. He has 2 years of team control after this. He has not performed as well as some hoped he would after Tommy John surgery. Maybe it's a chance to buy now and coach him up. You have the opportunity now of 2 months of him in your system to get him right, a full offseason to get him right in your system. You saw what 2 months of Trevor Rogers did.
True.
So if you're going to buy low potentially, which I'm not saying Sandy Alcantara is buying low, that's just he's a coveted piece. But if you're going to look elsewhere and say, hey, we can get a starting pitcher right now under team control, buy low, get him right, be it in AAA or at the major league level, because you need somebody to pitch. Then you have a full offseason with him. And then boom, he comes up, and I'm not saying he's going to win a Cy Young, whoever it is, but you feel pretty good about the value. And Kyle's giving me a look.
Because I'm imagining the Don Draper meme of Andy standing in front of a group of Birdland members with a poster board say, "Imagine Trevor Rogers Part 2." That would generate so many interesting reactions. And listen, Trevor Rogers is great, but it did take a year, and I don't know if we have that kind of slack. So I mean, not that a reclamation project another one would take another year, but it is just funny to imagine. It's like, yes, let's do Trevor Rogers again. And like, who can we trade away who will be an all-star next year? I don't know. Like, well, let's find somebody.
3 months ago, 2 months ago, we could have said the Trevor Rogers deal is the worst deal that Mike Elias has ever made. Now we can say it's a bit of a wash. And now you have Trevor Rogers under team control, somebody who could be in your rotation next year. So it is one side of the coin. It took a year for him to get there, but the other side is, hey, it might have been worth it because maybe Trevor Rogers is a long-term left-handed pitcher in your rotation.
I was going to mention Trevor Rogers earlier on one note. I mean, his emergence, if we feel like that is real, if we feel like that's sustainable, which I mean, I don't really see why not. I think that maybe helps you when you think about the future of Cade Povich, who, has recently taken, 90 pitches to get through 3 innings or whatever. It's a little bit of a struggle. And maybe he looks more like a long reliever or something like that at some point, which might just help, when we talk about these pieces fitting in the right place, that trade might help the Orioles bullpen in that it makes it easier to move a guy like Cade into a bullpen role.
Yeah. And to Andy's point about buying and selling, longtime listeners of the Banner Baseball Show are probably sick of me making this reference, but I bring up what the Chicago Cubs did at last year's trade deadline, where that was a team that they thought was going to be competitive, wasn't as good in the first half. They were under 500 when they hit the trade deadline, but they still wanted to be competitive the following year. So they got back tradable assets. They got back young players. They bought a little bit while they sold. They got Isaac Paredes, infielder, in a deal that sent out some big leaguers from the Tampa Bay Rays. And what did they do the following offseason? But traded him for Kyle Tucker. So that's something that the Orioles could very well do. It's a little bit of both. They just have to get as much talent in here as possible under team control in their farm system beyond this season, because whether those guys are going to be in the big leagues in long term or whether they're going to be flipped in the offseason, they need to maximize this window. And that's why this is such a critical time. Guys, we've gone on long enough, and I feel like we're going to do 7 emergency podcasts over the next 6 days between all the guys that are going to be dealt. So I will let you go now, but thank you so much for offering your thoughts on the trade that sends Gregory Soto to the New York Mets in exchange for Wellington Aracena and Cameron Foster. Thanks so much for tuning in. Read all of Andy and Kyle and Danielle Allentuck's great work on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, and John Mioli as well, who does Inside the Dugout, my usual co-host. Hoping to have him back on at some point next week, but boy, it is going to be a busy week between the doubleheader Tuesday, trade deadline Thursday. Got a lot on our plates here. Kyle Goon, Andy Kostka, thanks guys so much, and I'll catch you around. Subscribe to the Banner Baseball Show, by the way, anywhere that you get your podcasts. Write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. Andy's just going to keep on waving until we end this show. For those two, I'm Paul Mancano.
Follow him for music takes and pictures of dogs.
Exactly. And occasionally some baseball.
Sometimes
I'm Paul
Orioles.
Mancano.